and want to lock these people up. And I'd say lock the SOBs up. Increase the penalties. Increase them. I would put the son of a gun in jail. Put them to death.
Vorshak is 2020. It's worth remembering that the former senator from Delaware is partly responsible for some of the worst aspects of today's criminal justice system.
It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask, what made them do this? They must be taken off the street.
What did Biden mean when he said, I don't want to ask what made them do this? I don't care if they've been victims of society. What did Biden mean when he say that? Let me explain to you. Let me show you exactly what Biden mean when he said that.
Deal. One part of that New Deal was the National Housing Act of 1934, which introduced ideas like the 30-year mortgage and low fixed interest rates. So now you have all these lower income people who can afford homes. But how do you make sure they don't default on their new mortgages? Enter the Homeowners Loan Corporation. The HOLC created residential security maps, and these maps, they're where the term redlining comes from. Green meant best area, best people, aka businessmen. Blue meant good people like white collar families. Yellow meant a declining area with working class families. And red meant detrimental influences, hazardous, like foreign born. Housing segregation means we are having vastly different experiences with crime and vastly different experiences with policing because of effects on wealth. So home ownership is the main.
Your poverty was created by your government. Let's understand that the government intentionally created a program that ensured European homes and not Black homes. Understand this happened in 1938. But I just want to give you a perspective because as far as I can find back, it's housing price and inflations. Right? So in 1967, the average cost of a house was about $21,000. Average house was $21,000 in 1967. Now I want you to understand what the inflation of property of houses from 1967 to 2001, that house appreciated in value from $21,000 to $191,000. Understand that the bank personally gave white people their own banks. This is what I need you to understand. We're in a country where it's all about access to capital in order to accumulate wealth. And the government set and backed and financed them wealth. Now, what I also want you to understand is that wages was never set to keep up pace, right, with the accumulation of capital. For most U.S. workers, real wages have barely budged in decades. On the face of it, there should be heady time for American workers, U.S. and unemployment is as low as it is been in nearly 2 decades, 3.9% as of July. And the nation's private sector employers have been adding jobs for 101 straight months, 19.5 million since the Great Recession. Related cuts finally abated in early 2010 and 1.5 million just since the beginning of the year. But despite the strong labor market, wage growth has lagged economists' expectations. In fact, despite some ups and downs over the past decade, several decades today, several average wages, that is the wages after account for inflation has about the same purchasing power it did 40 years ago. And what wages gains there have been have mostly flowed to the highest paid tier of workers. America paycheck are bigger than 40 years ago, but their purchasing power has hardly budged. Understand that. I want us to understand what's going on. You was never going to be able to pull yourself up by your bootstrap when you talk about surviving off a working wage, when you're coming up in a system that is based on capital and the other group of people was giving access to capital. Understand this, low-wage workers are suffering from declines in the real value of the federal minimum wage. Understand what this is. After the longest period in history without an increase, the federal minimum wage today is worth 17% less than 10 years ago and 31% less than in 1968. The federal minimum wage, right, is worth less than 31% than what it was in 1968. You was never going to pull yourself out your bootstraps through working. See, what you have to understand is Europeans were given banks. That's what their homes were. Let me show you why I say this. Europeans were basically giving banks. Your home equity is a bank. It is access to capital. Now, what I want y'all to pay attention to is what it says here. If you're thinking about making a home improvement or looking at ways to pay for your children, college education, you may be thinking about tapping into your home equity as a way to cover the cost. This is a difference between what your homes could sell for and what you owe on the mortgage. Home equity financing can be set up as a loan or a line of credit. White people was given this bank. They was able to use this access to financing through lines of credit, home loans, and able to pay for their children to go to school, and able to start business, and able to invest in other opportunities to generate revenues and resources that you as Black people were not able to do. And this was really put together by the government. The government insured the houses, making a 30-year mortgage possible. The 30-year mortgage is what created the value in these homes that priced you out of a position to even be able to afford to buy a house today. This is what Biden meant when he said that he don't care if we've been victims of society, is that he knew that we had been impoverished by American practices. And those impoverished people did things in order to survive the impoverishment that was created by the government. And now his solution was to incarcerate those who have been victimized by their very government. This is what Biden knew then, and that's what he pushed. Biden knew we was victimized by our government, knew we enforced the conditions that would produce crime, that would back us in positions where we would have to commit crimes. Biden knew this the whole time.